So, welcome everyone. It's a delight to have you here for another installment of Kathy's Corner. I'm Barbara Tien, your host here at Project Kin, and we're delighted to have Kathy Stone, who has been a professional photo organizer for decades out of Calgary Photo Service Solutions in Calgary, Canada. And she started with us as a very loyal Ponga member and ultimately volunteered to start this series called Kathy's Corner, really helping people get over that first inertia of that big box of stuff and you just don't know what to do with. We put together a series kind of made up that would be a good idea to have a way to stay in touch and keep this going as we go through that and maybe even go through that together. Kathy popped up with the idea saying, hey, after all this time handling other people's stuff, I'm trying to do my own now. So maybe I should talk about that process. We loved that idea as Ponga. As Ponga went off the air, I created this post Ponga community. And now, as we are Project Kin, we still love the idea. In fact, Kathy's Corner has been a cornerstone for what we're doing here in Project Kin, because you need to bring those materials into a digital environment where all of a sudden all kinds of new projects are possible. And that's what we're really trying to do here. The simple idea is stories. You have lots of ways of pursuing the genealogical efforts that you're involved in. But when it comes to telling the stories, there are so many ways to do that today. As I looked back, I realized that genealogy itself had often been one of the first use cases for a lot of new technologies like photography. Um, you know, um, uh, all the different tin types and daguerreotypes and all of the new forms of of photography as they came out quickly applied to families and telling family stories, even self-published book publishing by the 1940s and 50s. These are the kinds of things that people are using, these ways of telling stories, and genealogy has lots of formalized ways to track the structure of family history specifically. But the gushy story part, some of which may be not completely sure, but we know it's a good story and it has been foundational to who we are as a family. Those are stories that need to be told, and we've realized there are a lot of different ways they might be told. So we're here to help each other tell those stories and learn about the history and learn the discipline of family history, while also the skill set, techniques, and best practices for digital storytelling in all of its many forms, some of which we're still inventing. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my good friend, Kathy Stone, who's going to pick it up. A couple of logistical points here. We try to keep the formalized talk somewhere around 30 minutes so that we have plenty of time for discussion. So I want you to think about those questions and keep that discussion going as we enter into it. I also, all of you, I think, on this call are familiar with Google Meet at this point, the little kebab menu to go get whatever, change your settings for your microphone or whatever else. Use the mute button to, as you already have. And with that, let's get going. Remember, you are going to have to be the one to unmute yourself when it comes time to ask questions. And I know Kathy, as I am, eager to hear those. And with that, I'm going to put myself on mute. Come on in, Kathy, onto the stage.
All right. Thanks, Barbara. It's I think we can move on with what we're talking about next. And we're getting I know, come on. Oh, there it is. Nope, it's not. Okay. Oh, we checked it and it worked, and now it won't work. Okay.
Well, there you go.
This is what we're going to talk about today, archiving the originals, because we're moving on. We've digitized everything now after all that sorting and everything, or we've digitized a project. So now you've got your digital files and your physical stuff that we digitized in some way, be it movies that were converted, photos that were converted, slides, negatives, all that stuff, photographs of things, all that stuff. And now we have our online digitized portion but we also still have all the stuff, and we still need to deal with that stuff. Okay, now it works. So if you're wondering where we are in the steps, we are at step 5 of the 8. We are at the archiving the originals and the digital files. Just if you're trying to keep up that way. And I'm just going to go to here. That's where we're at. My arrow's going to work. Yes, they are. So when we talked about sorting through photos, albums, slides, and negatives, we talked about the idea of what to keep and what to get rid of. And now that you've digitized things, it's a good idea that we revisit that. And so I put up the 3 questions we talked about back in the sorting or the gathering phase. And that was, how do you decide what you're going to keep and what you're going to get rid of? And now that things are digitized, these questions might have a bit of a different perspective or slightly different answers. And so the 3 questions that we talked about was, first of all, what do you want to have people to have? And that would be, what are things that are essential that people still have the actual item themselves or the actual photo, the document, things like family heirlooms that you want to that are significant enough to keep in the family. Barbara has inherited a secretary desk that is not a picture of it, in fact, but I found a picture of an old desk to put in there just to get the idea. So it may be large stuff. I've got jewelry from my family that will be passed on. You may have medals, you may have all sorts of things, objects that you want to keep, and think about where you want them to end up eventually. The other question was, what do you want to have? What do you want to have? What do you want people to see? And that means, what do they need to see a picture of, or as in a digital image of, so that they know what it looked like? In my examples here, I will probably give away everything but that desk, that's a stock photo, are items that belong to my family that I have. And they represent various things, and I'll probably pass them on to other family members at some point. But I want everyone in the family archive to see what these things were and know what they were. One is the Air Force ring belonging to my aunt. The big bronze medal was something my mother got for the top marks in the province of Alberta in I think 1948 in grade 9. And the little pin at the top belonged to my grandmother, and it was something she received during the war. So all of them have stories that need to be told, but I think rather than they're not items we would sell, but there may be items you have that stories need to be told of, but you can still get rid of the stuff. And in terms of that, where they just want to see things, I think in terms of maybe magazines, newspaper clippings, things like that don't store very well anyway, or large pieces of furniture that may be tough to store. But what is it good enough that you can just have a digital image of it and tell the story with that, and then you don't actually need to keep the physical item. But there are some things you're going to want to keep. And finally, what do they need to know? And that's back to our question of adding the storytelling behind everything and letting people know what things are. Okay, we want to consider where, as we talk about, move on into the stuff that we are going to keep, and part of those decisions on the previous slide too, consider where the items will be stored. Look at look at your location. How much space do you have to keep things in? The best place to keep stuff is where you live. So for location, a higher shelf in the main part of the house, away from sources of water. You don't want to keep originals, be they slides, negatives, things. You don't want to keep them in the basement or the garage or the attic, because it's prone to temperature fluctuations, humidity fluctuations, potential water damage, all sorts of pests, dust. So they like to live where you live. Temperature, you generally want somewhere in the range of 60 to 75 Fahrenheit or 15 to 25 Celsius. I converted for you. Again, much like your average room temperature, it's not good for stuff to be too hot, for sure, not good for it to be too cold either. Humidity is a big issue if you live somewhere that's humid. I always have a struggle with that because it's not as dry as New Mexico, but we're close. So We don't normally have much trouble with that, but in a lot of areas, humidity is a big problem with when you're storing different photos and other media. You want your humidity levels to be 35 to 55%. Again, much like what you live in. In terms of light, you don't want to put things in direct sunlight. Dark is best, like inside containers. If you want to display something, you could get special glass, like in a frame or something, glass to put over it that filters the rays from the sun that are damaging to things. But if you've ever taken a photo out of a frame, I don't know if you remember, there used to be those frames you could buy in like Target or Walmart that they'd have a whole bunch of little round or oval openings in one big frame, and you put a bunch of different pictures in. It's amazing when you take those out to see what color the pictures that showed of the portion of the picture that showed now, and compare it to the part that was hidden underneath just the piece of paper. So sunlight is hard on photos and objects too. And again, you want somewhere where there's no pests, no dust. You want to keep the things relatively clean. You don't want insects to infest your stuff or mice to chew on them. So you need to consider where you can keep this stuff. Dust, again, well-fitting lids, things like slip cases, anything that'll keep dust out of the containers where you've got stuff stored. Archive the originals. No, the next step is to make a plan. You've identified what you want to keep. So start to think about what type of items you have, because you maybe just don't have photos. You might have a variety of things. Consider the space you have available. Think about whether you want the material to be accessible, as in, can you dig it? Can you get the box out and look through stuff? Or if you're just putting it away for storage. And again, figure out what kind of a budget you might have for storage. How much do you think you could afford to spend on storage? And that might make you reconsider how much stuff you want to save, any of those items. Accessible or not means basically, are you likely to want to take the photos out of the container and look at the originals, or are you going to mostly look at your digital stuff? Okay, next. So what I did, because I love spreadsheets, so I've added to the spreadsheet of Kathy's Corner workflow checklist, which I'm sure there's a link to it in one of the articles, and if not, we can throw a link in the forum after this session, because I've added, this is now another page in the document that I've gradually added to. It's a checklist to keep track of your items, make your plan, and figure out what you'll need for storage. It'll also then give you a document to keep track of where things are, because now that we've gathered everything and dug it all out of all those places we found stuff and digitized it, we don't want to lose track of where the stuff is. We want to, keep where it is. And this information on the sheet will also help you with labeling the boxes that you put things in. So I don't know, I hope you can see I hope you're not on your phone or you won't be able to see them, but I hope you can see the headings. And I'll just talk a little bit about each heading. So number one is location. You might want to call it container number. So these are just named. I've removed the personal data. This is from one of my clients. So I've removed identifying data that was part of the box name, but essentially it's box 1, box 2, box 3. And these are their final storage boxes. You may not know that yet when you first start. So the first item is a notebook, and the details of that notebook, it was actually an old bound together, much like an old scribbler. I think everybody on here knows what that is. Containing photos, and it was the story of my client's life up until she made it in about grade 7. And it was called the study guide. So that's the reference name of it. Her initials, her full name would be there in the related person. That's what that particular document is about. It was from, I got a typo there, it was from 1936. The size of it's an 8.5 by 11, and it's in fair condition. The provenance I haven't filled out yet here. Actually, it is filled out on the actual document, but the names were written, so I had to delete them so that we could use this as an example. So the provenance was, where did this study guide come from? And his particular one came from um, a boxes of things that were at the person LMR's house. So that's what it says in the provenance. So it was originally her document and she had possession of it. Some of the other items that we have in there were sent by a cousin. So that provenance shows his name as where it came from, just to keep track of whose stuff you had. It's not necessary, but sometimes it's interesting information adds to the story. The container describes what these are in. These are in archival boxes, and the Onyx box is just the type of box it's in. It's just because it's a fancy word for black, I guess. And the size of the box. And then the location, that one, again, is at my client's house now, so I took her name out of there. But the location where that box is now, because she wanted her mother's stuff. And then the index number refers back to, if you remember on sheet 1, we were giving numbers to batches of things or individual things. That's my reference number to look back and see what that was. And it's just the index number, I don't want to lose track of them until the whole project is done. And finally, the digital location of that item. So I would have put a link in there to where that item is, the digital copy is stored, or a QR code to whatever, in this case, this client's using Forever. So there would be an indication of where it's located in her Forever account or on the external hard drive that they'll get from it, and then a column to write any notes. I feel like I'm talking fast. Any questions? I'll pause for a minute.
You sound like you need a drink of water.
It's because I'm talking fast.
I have this you mentioned was from a client. So I pasted in the link of the doc, the spreadsheet, the Google Sheet that is in the tools, and then a link to the tools topic or post in the Kathy's Corner topic.
Wonderful. So that's where you'll be able to find that. And it's all contained in one document, but you can just add this sheet to your document if you've already started working on it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, so it's just, to me, once we've gathered all this information, I think it's important to record it. And you could use something else. You could write it in a notebook. You don't have to use a spreadsheet. You could write it in a Word document, but just to keep track of, and you might not want as much information for your own stuff. But it's just, this is adapted from a course I took in archiving materials. So it's good information to keep track of. These are some common terms of archival storage. So now when we're talking about storing these items, there's a lot of terminology in this area, and some of it is meaningful, some of it not so much. Acid-free is a big word. That just means that the paper used in the box or the paper folders have been treated to neutralize acids that naturally occur in the wood pulp. Lignin-free, similar. Lignin is the polymers that hold wood together, and they're what causes newspapers to go yellow. Newspapers, hopefully we have only people on here who know what a newspaper is still and don't just read news online, but old newspapers that yellowed so fast, the reason they yellow is because of the lignin. So in the amount of lignin in newsprint is very high. Buffered is the paper has been processed to prevent the pH balance from changing over time. So that just makes it more safe for the photos. So it doesn't change that. I included the PAT, which is photographic activity test, which means if something has that as a certification, it means they've been tested for a variety of things, chemicals, all those things mentioned above, and aren't likely to damage photos, negatives, slides, or film. And then polyethylene and polypropylene plastics are types, and also there's another one, and I'll come to it later. I've forgotten it right now. Forgot to put it on the list. They're all plastics that are safe for storing things. Lots of plastic, not so much, but these ones are safe and usually available from archival places. What not to put your stuff in. Cardboard, shoe boxes, boxes that weren't designed for photos or other media, because they will contain acid, lignin, also adhesives that were used to put them together can be damaging. And I'll make a caveat there, because a lot of you are going to go, but Kathy, all my old pictures were in cardboard boxes of things that are harmful for photos. The cardboard boxes seem to, like shoe boxes and stuff. A lot of people kept their stuff in those, and it's still in relatively good shape. But if you want to, if you're going to keep something permanently and more years going forward, you want to stop any deterioration. And so they're not the best type of things. Plastic containers are sort of a good thing, bad thing. They're nice because you can see through them. Again, you want them to be polypropylene or polyethylene, not other types of plastic that could be harmful. One of the problems is that they can trap moisture in them, in the plastic, and particularly if you live in a humid area. You may want to put a desiccant in with the stuff if you're going to keep it in plastic. So if that's in the budget, then by all means, that's what you use. But so if you have a plastic container that you don't know is made out of the photosafe plastic, or you're using plastic, then you're going to want to maybe isolate the items, which I'll get to in a minute, by putting the things that are in there by sort of putting a barrier between them and the edges of the container. But plastic, the big caveat is you don't want moisture, because moisture and anything you're storing, not a good combination. You don't want to use containers that are too small for the items and cause them to bend or make them not able to lie flat, because that's just damaging them. And you don't want to use anything or keep anything that's dirty, damaged, mildew, or moldy. And on the in the bottom two pictures there, you see an album that's got a real good warp to it. Oh, this will work. That one, maybe if I point there, that one. The next picture beside that is the inside of that front cover. This album got wet. It was all dried. But in the front cover, you can definitely see mold and mildew on the pages. And also that was the scrapbooks from the old days. Those were not photo-safe pages and things. So you don't want to keep something like that that's been damaged because of the danger from the mold. The mildew just smells. Mold is a real health hazard. So if you've got something like that, I don't think we talked about this in the beginning when we talked about scanning. You want that digitized, and you want it that sadly you want to throw that away, because it's not good for you. What do I like? I like to use archival boxes. There's a picture there of some that I used. I did that job for a client. So archival boxes, they come in a whole bunch of different sizes. These are a higher end black one, which I think the company, I'll have to put that in the chat after I finish this. I don't think I put it on there, called Native Archival, but I'm not entirely sure they sell to the public either. But they are a very nice quality box. That if you're storing, I like that style of box if I'm going to keep my photo boxes, say, on a bookcase in the living room or the family room. If they're going in a closet, you don't necessarily need to spend the money that you would for the higher end box that looks really nice. But it's a very nice box. Those are double wide, so those are photo boxes that we have a picture of there. And I love them. That's what my pictures are going to go back into, photo boxes. So that'll just be, it'll be handy for everyone to, those are probably one of the best things if you want to view the pictures. There's also archival sleeves, bags, envelopes, and enclosures. So, and back on the boxes, I've skipped too far ahead there. They make archival boxes for specific objects. You can get them for photos. You can get slide boxes. I highly recommend, if you've done slides that are either in carousels or those old plastic containers, 10 to 1 the plastic of either carousels or the plastic the rectangular shaped ones were not photo safe or safe for your slides. But the slide boxes reduce the amount of stuff that you have, particularly if you're storing carousels. Reduce the space needed to store dramatically. So I highly recommend looking at the type of thing you've got and what kind of product would be best to put it in. They make boxes to store clothing. If you're keeping a wool dress or we found T-shirts that were from my client in the 1930s. She was on the pep team, isn't the right word, but the people, they had little hats and they had T-shirts with not that they weren't the cheer squad, but they were the group that created all the events at school. Well, we found her T-shirt and her hat. So those will go in a box and be kept by the family. And so there's special boxes for that and instructions on how to preserve them and how to put them in the boxes. And one of the references that I'm going to give you in a minute, where Barbara and I talked about whether we'd share names of companies or not, but I had to do this because Archival Methods, and the link I'll be coming up soon. Archival Methods has all these things. I use them even though shipping to Canada is really expensive. But they've also put on their website, they have a very informative blog and also something called the Archival Methods Preservation Guide, which I'm going to give you the link in a moment. We'll go into all the different ways of storing things, what you need, how to protect things, what's best for what kind of item. Instead of us going through all that today, that'll give us a good source for. It's very detailed and it talks about almost everything you ever wanted to know about archiving. So I think it is, like, to me, it is my Bible. It's the best resource. They actually have hard copies of the preservation guide. So it's a fantastic reference. So there's also sleeves, which are, you can still see me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is a sleeve. It's probably not showing up as much, but this is a negative sleeve. And you can cut it to fit if you have shorter. This was I had some negatives that were actually this long. They make the same kind of sleeves, and this is a whole package of ones that you could put letters or documents in. In terms of whether I use a sleeve or not, I make the decision based on, I wouldn't put all my 4x6 photo, like the pictures, into a sleeve. That would cost too much. They're just going in a box because I'm not even sure we're going to keep them. We're keeping the negatives. So the negatives for the photos are the original they're the original copy as it is, not a print. So the negatives will go in sleeves and then in envelopes to be. Grab one off my desk here. So this is like a negative sleeve. So it's in a paper sleeve that I can write all the information on, and then I'll stick them into sleeves because negatives are prone to being scratched and things, so you don't want them really touching each other. And that's what I'm going to do with my negatives. My photos are going to just go in boxes like that. I'm not going to bother putting them in any kind of enclosure within, other than the dividers to separate the dates and things. I've used bags for, like I said, I think I mentioned magazines, things like that. The only photos that I might put in a sleeve are either very old ones that are very fragile or ones that are already damaged because you don't want them to be touched. I also put, in order to make maximum use out of my boxes and not have to have a box for every size of photo, I use because this bulk of the photos in there are 4x6. I use a 4x6 clear sleeve to put all the little tiny photos in so that they don't fall out of place where they go. And you can put in a piece of archival paper behind them, and then they're not dropping in between things because they're hard to keep track of, or somebody's not missing them if they're looking for them. So, the little school photos, or there were older photos that are squares, Polaroids, similar to that. I might put those in a sleeve just for just to keep so they fit better in the box and aren't getting lost in there or getting damaged by other photos hitting them or something because they're smaller. You can get archival binders if you want to be able to view your photos. They make archival binders that you could put all the pictures in and still be able to look through them. Another way to separate things is what they call interleaving sheets, which are archival tissue that you can put in between things. And I've used them you can put them between, if you don't want to put, you've got a box of documents and you don't want to put paper in between each one, or you don't want to put them in sleeves, you can just put some interleaving tissue between them, because of course all the paper and documents you're storing, they aren't going to be photos. They're going to have lignin in them, and you don't want them to contaminate the other things that you might be storing. So that's just some of the things I like. Where have I got them? Primarily, I mentioned I get stuff from Archival Methods. I've also got things from my provincial museum and archives here in Alberta. Actually sell some photo storage boxes. They don't have quite the array of different products, but there are some products I can get from them, so I use them because it supports my provincial archives, and also the shipping's a lot cheaper to get it just shipped from Edmonton as opposed to from Rochester, New York, where Archival Methods is located. So resources. That's the link, and maybe Barb, you can just snag these and put them in the chat.
Can I suggest that at the end of this we output your slides to PDF, and then it's include the PDF in the forum, because I'd have to type those. And
I will do that. Okay.
Yeah.
We can do that then. So Archival Methods presentation guide you can find online.
Actually, I was already there
because we don't really need to look at those. And I'll come back and talk to you now. Archival Methods, they have the preservation guide is available online, and it's just incredible. Like, I think I raved about it earlier. I'll just rave about it again. They also have a blog, and the most recent blog is talking about how to store your old vinyl records that you want to keep. So they talk about everything. I've taken courses from them, and they talk about how to store clothing, and you name it. They have a method, or they will help you with the ways to store it, which is why they're, for me, one of my favorite places to shop for, even though they're in the States. Which, if you're in the States, you're lucky. But even though the shipping to Canada is a fair amount, but the preservation guide will pop up in the header on that website. There's also their blog, which will also pop up in the header. And they also have I think it's under the help, they have a glossary. So if you're trying to figure out what all those weird terms are, you can look in the glossary. Other places that you could get stuff, University Products is another. I could copy the links now. Hang on. Chat. Paste. That's another place that I know photo managers who can buy things that have bought stuff from. And that site also has information on it too.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another one. Gaylord Archival is another place that those are all out of the States. I recommend checking with your local provincial archives. I stumbled on them at a genealogy event I was at that they had a booth at, and I was unaware they even had sold these kind of things. So sometimes, you like to buy local. It's good. So I'm at questions now. 20 minutes exactly, Barb.
I just wanted to add to that. I grew up as the little sister to a very good artist. And
Ah,
so we always learned to go to where the nearest art store is, because wherever
yes.
she is, often because of shipping, by the way, she's
Mhm.
hunting out art supplies. And local art stores will have things like acid free paper and this
Yeah.
glassine paper and stuff like that,
They probably
which,
have the same tissue. You just got
right,
to
right.
grab my
Yeah,
pencil, because that's a very common question, is what should I use to write on backs of
right.
photos?
Two pencils
Is
or
you should
three.
not use a pen. Do never use a pen to write on your photos. I know we all inherited a bunch with them. This is they're
Photo.
basically Stabilo pencils, and this one is made by Creative Memories. Archival Methods, this is called a photo labeling pencil. Archival Methods sell them. Probably all the other places do, but they're a soft Stabilo art pencil that you don't get real neat writing with it because it's a very soft leaded pencil, but it is really good. One of the best things to write because it won't bleed through the photo. It's not going to dent the photo or anything. So, and I guess back to the whole thing of what if you're deciding things to keep when we're organized, getting our stuff back, is if you've digitized your photos and you haven't copied anything on, like if you didn't scan both front and back, you might want to go through the photos and see if there's writing on the back and add that to your digital images before you throw them away. Another source, which I should add to this before I send it to you, Barbara, Creative Memories sells boxes that are polyethylene that are photo safe. They're lighter. The cardboard boxes, surprisingly, are really heavy, especially if you do the double
Yeah.
ones. But Creative Memories has ones like this. I'll get it out of the fuzziness there. But this is one of their storage boxes. So it's a
Mhm.
similar idea. You've got the pockets in it, and um, and it's made out of photo safe plastic. It's dark, and another good place to store photos. The problem with narrow ones like that, wider, the double boxes are heavier, but they also enable you to put things that are bigger in the lid. This one I can't go past more than a 5x7, or I can put my because it's designed to hold. It'll hold up to 5x7s, but anything bigger obviously aren't going to fit in that box.
Yeah.
So you put stuff in the lid, but only long, skinny things in those lids. Whereas if you've got a double box, you can add a folder to the top, an envelope or something with other things that go in that date group. And
Yeah.
how you decide to organize, up to you. I'd use chronological order just because it relates to my brain. So, but I will. I also, having said that though, I'm not mixing together my mom's family with my dad's family with my husband's family. Those will be separate in chronological order. I'm not going to put everything from 1950, no matter what family it belonged to, in one box, because most likely, which is back to the old organized by fate by people. That's kind of I,
Families are like the higher level of
families
people.
are the hierarchy that I'll use, and then chronological order
Yeah.
within.
Which, by the way, I'll put a plug in for thinking in terms of projects.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, we fell on it as a name, but to be honest, I have found that it really has started to change how I think about what I'm going after.
Mm-hmm.
When people come to me talking about, well, I want to tell my family story, it is always that giant mountain, right?
Yeah.
It's that I'll never get it right. But when you break it down into smaller things, kind of like the way you break down the physical objects,
Yeah.
then each one becomes compelling, which is where we started at Ponga with I have a picture and it's got 8 people around.
Yeah.
Why are they there? Why is the guy wearing a bathing suit? What about the monkey?
Yeah.
um, these kinds of
Exactly.
things beg the story,
Yeah.
and it gives you something to latch on to and go research, even
Yeah.
if you haven't yet told a larger arc. And there may very well be a larger arc there, but by preserving each of the elements that got you there, you can
Yeah.
now follow that cookie trail back and put the pieces
Which is
together.
why I like the spreadsheet or some form of document to keep track of where
Yeah.
things are. Now that you've got both original and a digital, and hopefully you don't have multiple or multiple original
I do.
copies of the same thing left, but you got to get rid of those,
Yeah.
or separate them out somehow. I'm I'm throwing mine away, and you all have permission from me to throw them away if you like. Since bulk of my digitization was done from negatives, I may actually toss the prints completely. I'm just going to chat with my sons and see. I'm quite fortunate because I see all the time that my kids don't want any of this stuff. I'm very fortunate in that both my kids are interested in it. And one of them is, he'd probably say, yeah, throw the prints if we have digital. The other one, I'm not too sure he'll agree to throw anything away. So it'll become his problem in a few years, but at least they want this stuff that's organized and the stories are told.
Right.
They don't want 100 boxes of stuff that nobody knows what's in it.
No, it's like looking at libraries and
Yeah.
seeing microfiche. Microfiche are like slides for newspapers.
Yeah.
And you know, at a certain point for a newspaper, for a library, piles and piles of degrading paper is dangerous for them, just because of, never mind insects and fire. So moving all of that out into a form they can still do their job, which is to convey what was on that paper at the time. Now, you know, I guess a lot of that microfiche is nearing obsolescence, but it is analog. As I've said many times, don't think digital is better than analog. Our bodies are analog.
Yeah.
And digital is simply a convenient, very, very highly compressed form.
Yeah.
And analog is always better. But photographic means are not always better than digitizing because of lenses and optics and so on.
Any questions about what kind of things are you wanting to store that I might, because I thought rather than going through absolutely every type of item that one might want to store, so that I talked about a bunch of things you don't care about, I just ask and say, do you have a question about a specific type of item? We've kind of talked quite a bit about photos, but are there other things you have to store that you don't quite know how to store them? Because, you know, Barbara, you need to take a picture of that desk so you did tell the story of it too. So
that's exactly what I was going to pop in with, is that some artifacts are artifacts like a Disneyland coin that is plastic that you won, and why the story was important at that moment. Now, it could be that a Disney coin from 1932 is in fact a collector's item. So there's always that aspect of it. Is this fundamentally a collector's item? Or could it be? But then if it has no other kind of intrinsic value, then letting it go and capturing the story in photographic form is perfectly fine. But for things that are like jewelry that have an intrinsic value, or, you know, this desk that is big and I want to capture the story to it, finding means to capture that story that could be written form, it could be a little video. It can be any number of forms, as long as there are ways to always read it. I mean, the nice thing about text is that you can always read it without a device. But finding ways to bring those in a consistent, organized way ensures that you have a way to tell those stories. And to the QR code session I had, that's why I was talking about putting QR codes underneath a chair or a piece of furniture or something like that.
I wasn't bolting. So I have this. It's a ship in the bottle.
Right.
Mother's name is on it. And I've taken photos of it, but a friend of mine does these really cool little virtual sessions during COVID, and also in person, where she is, called Show and Tales, which is like show and tell when you were a kid. But people bring an object that has meaning, three things. And I can't remember the other two, but something that is meaningful for you, that you want to tell the story. So now I took this ship and told the story behind it. So now I have a video, because they were all recorded. That video will go with the pictures and explain the provenance of this ship in a bottle.
That's a great example, because we talk about things like, well, I did a video to talk about this paperweight, for example. But what I do with it, I don't remember where I put the video. Well, if you don't have a structured way that you're archiving things, you may very well lose it. But if it's something that was public, like a video that you did on a program, you can take that video and pop it over to the Internet Archive. If it was ever public, you can put it onto the Internet Archive, which doesn't keep a pointer. It keeps a copy of it. so
Yeah.
that if the website changes, if it's removed, it's still over there in the Internet Archive. And you can put a QR code, for example, to that Internet Archive on the object. And that's a cool way to always make sure they're going to take care of the where the hell did I put that digital version, take care of that problem for you. Because even if you kept it all, private, no one else has access to it. But let's talk about private again. If you do that, it's not private.
Yeah.
But something that was a public performance wasn't private anyway.
That's right. So.
Okay. I got a question. What would I do with all grandma's diaries then? They're not going to be, I'm not digitizing them. I am not. It would take me from the rest of my life. So how could we store them?
Well, I would, if you just want to keep the hard copies of them, I would just maybe like to organize them by however I imagine diary kept by date and her name, and I would just get in a box. I would put something like that in an archival box, and just get a box to keep them in, and label what the box is, and add it to your document where you're describing for somebody who comes along later, and just say, okay, this box has grandma's diaries in it. And they came, I got them from whoever. And then that's a good place, I think, too, to make a note. And if you share this with those who will be doing this after, to make a note of what you want done with them when you pass. Like, we always hate to talk about that, but it's a good thing to talk about, is where do you want them to go? And surprisingly, and I don't know, I know you're from Calgary, where I am. I don't know where your grandmother origin was, but depending on where it is, a lot of times archives and museums will take the physical. It's surprising. I actually found with the client I was working with, they were my client, they ended up in Calgary at the end. And so my client, the daughter, was from here, but she was born in Olney, Texas. And her mom and dad were both from different parts of the US, and they were all over down there. And my client's grandmother was married. Her grandfather was a Presbyterian minister who traveled all over Oklahoma, Texas, and all over that southern area. He became well known for the guy you got to come and be your minister when we're building a new church and wanted a guy to open it. And so we have all these things from all these different churches. And so one day I had a whole bunch of stuff, and we had more than one copy of it. We had like 3 copies of stuff, and you don't need 3 copies. And we're digitizing it. And so I was tired of staring at digital photos and writing on them. So I thought, I'm just going to check and see if I could find this church. So I found what I thought was the origin of it. And I thought, well, I could email. And then I thought, I'm just going to phone. So I phoned. I talked to the very nice receptionist, and I said, I have this stuff that goes back to, the other thing I had in handwriting was my client's mom had written out her grandmother had his wife wrote out a whole list of everyone who was the minister at the church back to the 1800s. And she had this list just in her handwriting. And I said, I also have this. I don't know. Oh yeah, we'll have anything you want. Just, digital or originals or.
Wow.
So it's like we just think, oh, nobody wants this stuff, but actually people might want it. The museum here in Calgary wants anything that we want to give them from this client that I was working with. Anything to do with, and this will make sense probably not to many of you, but it will to Linda, anything to do with oil, anything to do with charity, anything to do with the arts. They'll take anything like that. So.
Well, the flip side of that is also to take anything, if you mentioned earlier, newspapers and articles that, might have mentioned somebody. You do want to think twice about continuing to squirrel those away, because what's important about that, they are published materials are probably, not necessarily, but they're probably on the web and you can look and find out. But what's important is the context that you've wrapped around them. So creating a way to capture the live links or a PDF of the link or whatever else gives you a way to capture it. I have this wonderful scrapbook from the late 19th century, and it's got all of these obituaries of families and friends that had passed, but there's no date for any of the newspapers or even reference of what publication it was. It makes it a little bit hard. But providing that context that pulls it all together is really helpful. Yeah, newspapers.com is a great way to get there.
Newspapers.com, if you watch quite often, probably around Black Friday, often they are a family, probably around Thanksgiving, more likely American Thanksgiving, they'll have a free weekend. And I found an amazing amount of stuff there. Like I'm thinking, okay, newspapers.com, it's going to all be, we're going to be talking about like New York Times and stuff. But I actually found a whole bunch of articles by searching by my family's names. I found articles, and this will mean something to Linda and Marcy. I found articles from the Edmonton Journal, which Edmonton's a fairly big city, but it's not that big of a city. From the Edmonton Journal, I found articles from the Saskatoon newspaper, the Regina newspapers, and I found out that the medal I showed you earlier, and there's a picture of my mom that Barbara recognizes because it's the one that the budgie birds, it was framed without glass on it, and the budgie bird, there's a budgie bird poop on the original. And it's a beautiful picture of my mother, and it was obviously a professional photo. And we've always wondered, because my family did not have money, and she was young in the photo, we thought, why on earth would there be a professional photo? I found the newspaper article. It connects to that medal I showed that was on one of my slides earlier. Hi, Reed.
Hi, Reed.
Next to that. And it's the pictures from the newspaper. That's why there was a professional photo. There was actually a newspaper article which explained the whole thing. And I just knew, I know what's engraved on the side of the medal, which isn't much, but it explained what the medal was given for and who else got it. And so I now have this whole complete story to go with that. What originally was a picture where we're all like, why would she have been altered? Like, that was a professional photo. Why, whenever would they have been able to afford that? So,
yeah, that's a great example of a project, of a story that opens up.
Yeah,
go ahead, Al.
As far as archiving stuff, how about Cabbage Patch Dolls and Thai, I forget even what the name of it was, the little, what is it, Beanie Babies?
Oh yeah. What I would do with those is get a decent sized, like an archival box, like the kind that would hold photos, but you can get, I don't know about the other places, but I know from Archival Methods, you can get boxes with little individual boxes in them. And probably they would suggest wrapping them in tissue and setting them in the boxes.
Okay.
I'll bet, I'm just Googling it now, but there's a collector's supply service or something like that. Yeah, collector's supplies. Yeah.
And then if you wanted to display it, you'd probably want to look at
collectiblesupplies.com
or
something.
One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to take pictures of it and save the pictures.
Yeah.
So at least.
And the sad news is, I don't know if you've done any research, is the value of them is not too great right now. So you may just want to hang on to them. I know a friend of mine is selling mint condition ones right now that belong to her sister and her list price is like $15 each. So
even maple?
Yeah, probably. I don't know about if they had maple, but maple might be still worth a bit more. But yeah.
Probably more in your end of the woods than in mine. So
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, so that. But if you wanted to store them and keep them, that I would put them in a box because it'll help prevent them from, dust, dirt, bugs.
Well, they're stored in a display case, for one of another word right now. Curio.
Right.
One other suggestion from, you can call it from Cheapo in Connecticut. When I do various things that end up with newspaper.com and they want more money, I store what it is and I wait until Thanksgiving and look them all up when it's free.
That's a great idea.
Almost free.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and that's how I use them too. I wait and then I go, okay, I need to look for these copies of all these newspapers because I've got newspapers in this client collection that are from late 1800s and they're in horrible shape. Like newspaper, like they turn to dust when you touch them. So
yeah,
Marcy.
Hi. Just as a note with the Cabbage Patch Dolls and all that, my mother-in-law always made these beautiful dolls for her grandchildren, and our girls had a few of those, plus they had a Cabbage Patch doll. And something called a pooch patrol and that sort of thing. But we were getting ready to move and taking our family home down to a minimum and moving to Cape Breton. And gosh, that was what we were getting ready, 2007. But the kids had moved out. And we had had a previous septic backup, and the box that all their dolls and things were in, precious things, got a little bit on it, but the dolls were okay. So we said, do you want these where you're living? And the answer was no. I did take pictures of them.
Yeah.
You know, and then I said, okay, they're going, you know, out to Value Village or wherever, because we can't take them with us. Sorry. Yeah. No, I was wondering, do they have special display things for old coins, like an old silver dollar or something like that?
Barb said yes. Yes,
in my quick Google for collectors supplies, the second sponsored host is something called Coin Supply Express. So I'm sure there are many vendors of all of those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you.
And they're one of the things that I've got my father collected trade dollars, which were in Canada. I don't know about in this. I'm guessing in the States too, because he's got a bunch from the States. But fairs or cities or things would issue a coin. Like we used to have Klondike Days in Edmonton, and they'd issue the Klondike Days trade dollar for the year of that, and you could spend the dollars sometimes even in stores. But they were nice. They were silver coins. And so he collected them from all over, and I have them. And the good part about that is, other than tarnishing, coins aren't that susceptible to, you know, damage or anything. Those are all still just in plastics, the things he organized them in, because it's down there with my load of work that I still have to do. So
one tip on that, if you think it might be valuable, it's worth a good search. And it doesn't take much, you know, get the date and so on, and you'd be surprised.
They are worth some of them are worth quite a bit. And so I was like, okay, well, that made me another problem, because they're all, now I have to think what we might do with them. So, but anyway.
Well,
Reed, were you expecting us at 5 o'clock? Oh, you're mute.
No, I've had landscapers here. I'm putting some asphalt from my cement driveway out. They were here. It's just been one day. So
you and Al both.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had everybody show up at the same time.
Yeah. And then they're putting new power poles in on my corner. So I had trucks and stuff all over today.
wow. Well, it's great to see you.
The only thing she missed was the landscaper with all the noise from the.
Oh.
Well, yeah. I talked to Reed earlier, or to Al earlier, and he had plumbers and landscapers and all sorts of things. So.
Oh yeah, they all hit at once.
Thursday must be their day.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, I have a little policy here that I always encourage people to stay and linger as we build a community, get to know one another. But I do try to stop the video after 1 hour, because that way, frankly, the videos get more interesting, a little easier to manage. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording, but you're all very welcome to stay. So hang on.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.